This is Leafs Morning Take with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill.
Now we've got a fight started here right off the bat with Rosehill.
30 minutes of live, nonstop Leafs talk starts now.
What is good, my friends? Happy Wednesday, presented by Botano and Skip. It's the Wednesday edition of Leafs Morning Take. Nick Alberga with you. Remember to subscribe, tap that like button, leave us a review wherever you're checking us out at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe on YouTube. Additionally, we're available wherever you find your podcast. Just search Leafs at Leafs Morning Take, or Leafs Morning Take, and you'll find us, and you see on your screen right there at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can subscribe. If you're watching right now and are not subscribed, what are you doing? At the Leafs Nation 401. Don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com for the very latest on all things Toronto Maple Leafs. I do a bit of a column called Muzzy's Musings following every game or most games. I did one last night. Clearly it was on Zach Aston-Reese. It was on Jet Greaves, your boy, and Killer Instinct. So make sure to go over to theleafsnation.com. Check that out. Thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns, drop us a line in the chat down below here on YouTube. We'll get to it a bit later on in the show. And coming up in 10 minutes from now, I've been meaning to do this for a couple days, but I'm going to dive into the Michael Bunting officiating crackdown, if you want to call it that. Dave Jackson, former NHL ref turned rules analyst for ESPN, will drop by, and we're going to dive into things further. It'll be interesting to get the perspective of a former official in the league, because we've seen what's transpired, especially the last little while when it comes to Michael Bunting. And I'm just wondering what this guy needs to do to get back in the good graces of the league. And I'm more so curious to see what's happening behind the scenes. Sheldon Keefe alluded to it the other day. Kyle Dubas would be talking to the league. How does that conversation go? Doesn't it make things worse? All those questions will be answered by Dave Jackson coming up in about 10 minutes from now. But for now, let's get over the boards. Oh, yes, Azar is born. And Zach Aston-Reese, what a conversation, folks. If you were to tell me in training camp when this guy was on a PTO, he'd go on to sign that contract and he would score 10 goals, I probably would have ran a naked mile. Let's be honest about it. Very old school of me, I know, but 9 and 10 on the season yesterday, 2-goal effort. He has 5 goals in his past 10 outings. And to me, the big story last night was the depth players. I thought the David Kampf line was outstanding. Clearly, the big boys were shut down. It went pretty much to script as what you expect for a Leafs team against a team like Columbus, starting a no-name goalie. With all due respect, again, to Jet Greaves. And the Greaves family were in attendance for this game. A Cambridge native, 22, undrafted. All he does is go out there and make 46 saves. And as a Leafs fan, you could always just sit there and laugh, because it happens every damn time a goalie you've never heard of makes his start, his inaugural start, his debut start against Toronto Maple Leafs. He goes out there and has the game of his life. So I hope all of you at the very least took the over on Jet Greaves' saves yesterday. Makes 46. And I guess the Leafs deserve credit for overcoming that, especially in the first half of the game. I didn't think they were outstanding by any stretch last night, but they found a way. I really can't be too critical of a meaningless game in the middle, or in the beginning of April, I should say, with not much in terms of ramifications on the standings. They got the 2 points. They outshot them 2-1. I thought for the most part, Greaves was good. Was he outstanding to make 46 saves? I think the jury's still out on that. A lot of it was a perimeter game. I thought the Nylander, Tavares, Marner trio on paper should have dominated this hockey game. They really didn't. They didn't do much at all. I thought the Christmas was lacking last night. A bunch of fanned opportunities. I think we saw 5 or 6. We saw Austin Matthews miss a couple of tap-ins. Like it's been that type of year for Austin Matthews, where he scores the empty netter. He has 38 goals, and the tap-ins alone, he could have 50 goals this year. No-brainer with that too. It's just the way, the luck's been going for Matthews so far this season. But bottom line, they got the 2 points. They took care of business. Was it their best outing? I would say no, although, again, they outshot them by a wide margin, 50-26, 26, as you see on your screen right there. Jet Greaves was a brilliant story. Credit to Columbus, by the way, missing like half their roster, stayed in the game. But anybody who's watched the Leafs throughout this season, previous seasons, and the regular season specifically, this happens. So I think they deserve kudos for overcoming that, getting the job done. They always seem to play down to their opponents. They were good last night. I mean, I'm taking nothing away from that game. But have we seen the Leafs play better? Profoundly, I would say yes. So that was your story. Zach Aston-Reese, the biggest takeaway for me, by far Toronto's best player on the ice. I thought the D was okay. Too many D-zone turnovers, and that goes across the board. A couple muffins from Justin Hall, Morgan Riley. And again, it's just so hard to be critical of a game. So, it's 2 points. You move on. 5 games remaining in the regular season. Next up is a stop in Boston tomorrow. And by the way, that was the penultimate home game of the season. So the Maple Leafs, after this, one final remaining home game that happens on Saturday against the rival Montreal Canadiens. So again, Dave Jackson's coming up in about 5 minutes from now. But now I'm going to turn things over to the one and only, and I'm sure Dave knows this man well. Here's 3 Hits with Rosie.
What's happening, guys? Welcome back to 3 Hits. Number 1. I guess we got to get used to Matt Murray not being around. No one really knows except for him and maybe a select few what the deal is and how long he'll be out. But I guess we're going to have to go with his reputation and assume that it might not be any time soon. So, in that, number 2, we're going to have to start focusing on Joseph Woll a little bit more. Looked pretty solid tonight, maybe a couple weak ones, but 4th win in the row in the NHL. This guy's showing that he can most certainly be an NHL goaltender, and it's nice that he's getting these reps right now. Nice that he's getting, some time in between the pipes. You never know what's going to happen down the stretch, if Murray's coming back, if he's going to have to start a game. Heaven forbid, Shalgren, heaven forbid Sammy gets hurt at some point in time, and Woll has to get thrown in, but he's showing that he is competent. It's not like they're going with a third stringer who is absolutely shaky and unproven and everything else. He looks like he's developing into a bit of a player, so that's fantastic. Number 3, Zach Aston-Reese. He's been making some noise lately. It's good to see. He's been scoring. It's his first 10-goal season of his career, and I mean, that's kind of a milestone that once you get to that, you're starting to get some ice time and get some looks and being able to play out there a lot more than someone who's not. So it's nice that he's trending in the right direction. Every team that wins the Stanley Cup always has good depth. And if you can get a guy like Zach Aston-Reese chipping in, offensively and getting some goals, you need that down the stretch. You need that in the playoffs. And, some people wonder where the big boys were tonight and stuff. I mean, we're resting guys, we're load managing, blah, blah, blah. And it's nice that when given the opportunity, a guy like Czar can step up and get things done. So kind of a blah game in the midst of kind of a blah time of the season. To be honest, the weeks are ticking by, and pretty soon it's only going to be days away from the drop of the puck of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I, for one, along with many, many other Leaf faithfuls who have been waiting very, very long for a first-round win, are going to be very excited for this one. So, onward we go.
There you have it. The man, the myth, the legend himself, Jay Rosehill, breaking it down. I do tend to agree. Zach Aston-Reese, what a really, really good story. Again, he was a PTO in training camp, earned his contract, and now has 10 goals on the season. He actually, in fact, got to 10 goals before, Alex Kerfoot, or in the same game as Alex Kerfoot, which I think is pretty tremendous considering where Kerfoot slotted into the lineup to start the year and Zach Aston-Reese. So kudos to him. Brought to you by our new friends over at Skip. We're happy to tell you about Mitch's Dishes by Skip using the promo code TLN15 on the Skip the Dishes app. You'll get $15 off when you spend $30 or more on Mitch's Dishes. Please note this offer is exclusive to Skip. Additionally, a portion of the proceeds will be donated to the Marner Assist Fund to combat food insecurity. Again, the promo code TLN15 for $15 off when you spend $30 or more on Mitch's Dishes. Skip is currently serving up game time eats across the GTA and Ontario in the likes of Brampton, Guelph, Kitchener, Toronto, Oshawa, and Waterloo, among other places. If Mitch likes it, it's got to be great. With that in mind, I'm so happy to bring in today's... Hey, sorry, my mistake, producer Alex. You gotta play the stinger for Skip right there, so appreciate that. As mentioned, I want to bring in today's guests. I've been looking at getting him for a couple weeks now. Finally, schedules aligned. I'm happy to bring former NHL ref, current rules analyst with ESPN. It is Dave Jackson. What's up, Dave?
I'm doing well, Nick. How you doing? Just enjoying. I'm enjoying the sunshine here. We had snow in Denver yesterday, but it's going to be back up in the 70s pretty soon. So that's spring in Denver.
Great to hear. Even here in Toronto, it's starting to turn into spring, which is great. Obviously, an exciting time in both markets with the Avalanche, the way they're playing, winning an OT last night. The Maple Leafs winning against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Got to ask you off the top. You see that ugly mug of Jay Rosehill earlier. What do you remember about that guy on the ice?
Well, I just remember everybody on the ice with him on his team played a little bit bigger when he was out there. But it's like having nuclear weapons, right? If you got somebody like Jay in the lineup, the other team tends to watch what they do and not take liberties. And he was a really good insurance pact for both the teams he played with, and never gave us any problem. He just did his job, and up and down, and you talk to him, and he'd just be like, "Yeah, I'm just out here to do my job," and that's good. That's what we're out here for too. And yeah, a lot of respect for those guys.
It's funny you say that because when I asked Jay about stories, we've met up a couple times in Toronto, once in Edmonton a couple weeks back. I'm like, tell me some stories about playing in the league and the relationship with officials. And he's like, it's never been bad. Like you guys knew how to do your job, and Jay and sort of his knew how to do their job. It was like it was like a common thing. You guys knew what was happening out there. As long as you kept things kosher and in game, it was fine. Like that's how Rosie tells the story.
Oh, absolutely. The tough guys are very easy to deal with normally. Um, there's nothing mysterious about it. They're out there. They want the ice time, and if somebody does something they shouldn't be doing, then they're going to have to answer the bell. And the guys that give you problems are the guys that are always that won't fight. That are always giving little jabs after the whistle, little doing the turn, trying to draw, the other team like go ahead, hit me type of thing, and then I'm going to turtle. Not Jay. I mean, you know what you're getting, and that's the same with all the guys of his ilk. Honest hockey players, and they're just out there to do a job. And like I said a couple minutes ago, just a ton of respect.
So I want to get into the Michael Bunting situation, but first and foremost, I would just love to get your opinion on the state of officiating in the NHL. I should preface by saying I'm not Mr. Bitch at the ref. I'll be honest. Like I think it's a tough job. I know even at a professional level, especially now with all the camera work and all the angles to see what you got wrong or what you didn't get wrong. I just think it's so tough. So I'll preface by saying that. But what's been your honest opinion, Dave, of the officiating in the NHL this season?
Well, just to back up a sec, like what you just said, when I started in the NHL, back in my first game was in 1990, and for the first 10 years of my career, it was one referee. And a lot of these games weren't even on TV. They might have been in local markets, but that's about it. And the TV truck guy would come in before the game and go, "Oh, we're on TSN tonight." And you'd be like, "Oh, right on." Like my family can watch me work because the games just weren't televised the way they are today. So you'd be doing a game out in LA on a Wednesday or Tuesday night, and you might have a controversial call. It's taken 3 days for them to FedEx that VHS videotape to Toronto for my boss to look at it. By that time, a bunch of other crap's happened in 2 days that it takes to get there, and he's forgotten about what you did. Now we've got like instantaneous slow mo, high def, 15 camera angles, and back when I started, if you didn't call a penalty, a lot of times that was considered good judgment. When in reality, I just missed it. And now when you get a scoring chance taken away, or a guy going on net, or a missed high stick. I mean, missed high sticks is probably the toughest call in hockey because it happens so fast, and you can never quite sure if it actually makes the contact, or if the player's trying to draw a penalty, or if he's just flinching to try and avoid being hit in the face, which a lot of guys do. Super hard calls, but we break them down into ultra slow mo, and it's really tough to be perfect. I mean, every referee wants to be perfect, but it's an unattainable standard. And I think the refereeing in the NHL is good. Now, we always focus every night or every 2 nights. There's one call on how did they miss this or why did they call that. But don't forget, if a referee calls 6 penalties in a game, misses one, so he's 6 for 7, but he's made 500 decisions. Every time there's a body check, every time somebody goes down, every sometimes somebody falls or a goalie gets bumped, I mean, there's still a decision being made. So if you look at their decision-making process, and fans don't realize that, I mean, they're probably like 499 for 500 when the night's over. But everything gets just the negatives get magnified. We never see about, wow, what a great hockey game. 3 penalties, called everything they needed, let the players play. Those get overlooked. We just tend to focus on the negativity.
Honestly, I don't know what possessed you to get into that line of work because I think you're so bang on with that assessment. But any theory as to why the Leafs continue to be one of the least penalized teams in the NHL year after year after year? Like this has been a thing since like Austin Matthews came into the league because we all know how potent that power play can be, right?
Right. So you're saying least they receive the least power plays.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, You should probably get in line behind the Edmonton fans on my Twitter account.
There you go.
Because according to them, with since they've had Connor McDavid, they never get power plays either. Now you're looking at those stats. I don't know, stats are stats, but when you look at the total number and break them down into per game, there's really not a huge discrepancy. It's usually about 1 point something per game less than the team that gets the most. I honestly don't have an answer for you there. It's you've got, if you look at the entire staff, there's a website called Scouting the Refs that breaks down each referee and how many penalties they've called on the home team versus, and those numbers, and from referee number 1 to referee number 36, those numbers are usually within half a penalty over an entire season. So, the notion that these referees are just going out and being homers or anti-homers, it just doesn't, the stats don't back it up.
Yeah, and my mistake on phrasing that question is a bit off, but I'm happy you jumped aboard and you understood what I was trying to say. It's been one of those things. I guess it's an anomaly the last couple of years, but it seems like every year the Leafs don't get the power plays that other teams get in this league. So let's get to the Michael Bunting situation. First and foremost, do you as a former official in this league think Michael Bunting is being mistreated? And judging by your first answer, I don't think so.
Well, I need to preface this. Living in Denver now and working for ESPN, we cover mainly U.S.-based teams. We will cover occasionally when Toronto comes in, when Edmonton comes in because of the star power. So I don't see a lot of Toronto Maple Leaf games. The only time I really see Maple Leaf action is when my Twitter feed blows up and people want me to look at certain calls. So I apologize for speaking in generalities to some degree, but I know what's going on, or I know what the perception is that's going on. And there's a couple of points I want to make just in general, and not concerning Michael Bunting, but concerning calling embellishments or not giving power plays on certain players. There's a really overused trope that, the referees want to be the show. They come in, they want to be the show and do this. Could not be further from the truth. I was there 32 years, and my hope every single night was I get in and out, not be noticed. Because people think referees are unaccountable. It couldn't be further from the truth. You're micromanaged, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but you're micromanaged. Toronto has a guy assigned to every game that's being played. I got one guy, if I'm working, I got one guy watching my game, 4 different camera angles, logging everything I call and everything I miss in his opinion. That gets clipped, sent to me after the game. It gets sent to the boss after the game. Half my games, I've got a supervisor live in the building who comes down after the game and personal one-on-one debrief with what you did that night. You get a mid-season rating on everything. Your skating, your positioning, your comportment, your judgment. And then at the end of the year, you got 36 referees, only 20 go to playoffs. So that's an affirmation of how well you've worked that year. So people think referees are unaccountable. They're extremely accountable. It's just not made public. And to think that a referee wants to go out there and say before the game, predetermined, I'm going to pick on Michael Bunting because I don't like him, could not be further from the truth. It doesn't happen. And I know a lot of your listeners will be saying, oh, that's not true. He does. But I can tell you, honestly, unless there's one outlier out there that might feel that way, as a group, guys do not feel that way. They don't want the attention on them. They do want to get in and have that game go smoothly. Players themselves, stereotypes exist for a reason. Narrative, players create those. Players create those things. Referees hate getting duped. They really do. And when they get duped more than once by the same player, then they're hesitant to sometimes make a call. Obviously, a blatant trip going on that. But when you see a player who has burnt you in the past and something happens that's not clear cut, because let's face it, the people that say the rule book should be called black and white, that's not possible. The NHL rule book is gray. Everything is judgment. Other than puck over the glass, everything is judgment. One fan's definition of a hooking penalty is the other team's definition of a great defensive play. It's a judgment call. So when you have a play that's a judgment call, it could go either way, like you're trying to get a sight line for it, and you're not sure if that's a penalty, and the player involved has duped you before, you would rather miss a call than make a call and then be shown you're wrong. And that's the player that creates that narrative, not the referee. The referee does not want to go out and battle with a player. Just doesn't happen.
So to that point, I mean, let's humanize the situation. As you mentioned, everybody's human. We're going to have our good days and our bad days. And it just seems like the bad days seem to happen against Michael Bunting and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I think you made the point there as well. Like, what do you think it is about Bunting's game that sort of triggers or annoys officials, if you want to call it that? Is it that they think he embellishes, or is it the chirping, or is it the constant bickering after the whistle?
It's probably all three, but I will preface it, and I'm going to give him props and a lot of respect. You can't blame a player for doing whatever he can to gain an advantage for his team. I mean, that's, the old saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. So I give a player a lot of props for saying, I'm going to do what it takes. I mean, goals are hard to come by. If I can get a power play for my team, I'm going to help my team. And that is, good for him. And not just him, but dozens of other players across the league. We see it every night. It's not just Michael Bunting. And I think if Toronto fans watched a ton of other games, they would see the same standard being applied to certain players. But I think it's up to the player to reestablish his reputation. Players need to earn the trust of referees. And there's players out there that do have that trust. They've been around a long time. They've never done anything to lose that trust. And if it's a play where the referee's not 100% sure and he thinks he might have got him in the face, for example, they're going to call a penalty there because they're not expecting a guy to try and cheat them or fabricate something. And these players also have good relationships with the referees. When you're for any player, I'm not talking Michael Bunting, when you're shaking your head, when you're raising your arms in the air, that doesn't help. It really, referees are humans, and most referees you can talk to. Go over to them in a commercial stoppage and say, listen, what you see there, I shouldn't have reacted the way I did. And referees have short memories. I mean, they really do. I remember Michel Therrien, the old coach of the Montreal Canadiens. I gave him a bench monitor one night in Anaheim, and he was really ticked at me, really upset. And 2 days later, I had Montreal again, and I come skating out in the ice, and he's standing on the players' bench. Team's not out yet, and I stop right at the players, and I could tell by his body language, he's looking like, oh, he's going to come after me again for the night. And I said, hey, Mike, are we good? Because I'm good. In fact, I don't even remember what happened last game. So are we good? And he kind of laughed, and he went, yeah, we're good. And it sort of broke the ice because I don't want to hold a grudge. And we were fine. Nothing happened that game. He yelled a couple of times. I said, I hear you. But I think that's how most referees want to approach situations. It's like, let's start with a clean slate every game. And I'll forgive, but I don't necessarily forget. If you've burnt me once, there's a chance you're going to burn me twice.
Yeah, and that's the thing too with Bunting. Like, obviously, he wants to get back in the good books, and we saw that to an extent last night, where it seemed like players that are actively going after Bunting, knowing what they've learned in the media. And I think he had some self constraint, and he held back a bit, which is great to see. But I think this will happen over time with Michael Bunting, and there are examples throughout the league of guys, rectifying their situations or their game, right? Like Matt Cook is an example. I think Brad Marchand off the top of my head, like. Those are guys in the past that you just knew had a reputation to them, and it changed a bit over time, right?
Oh my God, Brad Marchand, when he came in the league, it was like, oh, I'm not him again. And then he
Yeah.
realized, I think he had a great leadership group around him, like Bergeron, those guys. I think they told him, listen, you're a good hockey player, just play hockey. And look at him now. I mean, the guy's a star, a great player. And going back to what I said about the guys in the Toronto Situation Room, even if I wanted to, I mean, you heard stories back in the 80s and 90s where guys would just, a player would get a bad reputation and he couldn't lose it because the referees would pick on him. It doesn't work that way today. Like I said, every call that I make or that is potentially missed gets logged. And your bosses look at it and they don't look at the whole big picture of that game necessarily when they see these clips. They look at one clip and they go, that's a terrible call. They move to the next clip. That's a terrible call. And referees wouldn't have the excuse to go, well, it's because it was that certain player. The boss is going to say, Stephen Walken's going to say, no, I don't care what player it is. Those are bad calls. And you need to improve. You need to be true to the standard. So guys would be cutting their nose off to spite their face if they went out looking to burn a certain player.
I totally agree. Dave, I think it's a difficult job, and you do a great job of breaking things down on ESPN. I catch a lot of those broadcasts, and I really appreciate that element of the broadcast that you guys provide. Because, again, I'm not Mr. Like Bitch at the officials. I understand, people are human. We make mistakes, and it's just magnified under the microscope, especially in this country. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on today, addressing the Michael Bunting situation, because it's getting out of control in this market with the Stanley Cup playoffs just around the corner. Probably not the first time we're going to talk about it. Appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Anytime. What a beauty right there. Former NHL official, now with ESPN as a rules analyst. If you haven't caught ESPN's broadcast, it's always kind of cool. Like the NFL does it a lot. The NBA does it a lot, where a foul or a play will happen, then they'll go right to the official. And I like that, aspect from ESPN. So I appreciate Dave coming on and reacting and breaking down the Bunting situation more so from the official standpoint. We really don't get that a lot in the media. I know different sports allow their officials to talk, not really in the NHL. Meantime, the Betano wrap-up is presented by Betano.ca. The game starts now, 19 plus. Please play responsibly. Let's get to it. I'll be honest, it's been a tough start back on our bets this week. We're 0 for 2, a bad beat with Minnesota on Monday. Then the under went to die last night in Toronto. We had the over in that game. I was like, Jet Greaves, here we go, 46 saves. So hopefully we start fresh today. I'm going to look to some Major League Baseball. So the Blue Jays finally get back on track last night. Yusei Kikuchi, what an outing for him. Looked a bit turbulent at the start, but he found his way just a tad. I'm going back to the Blue Jays, but I'm taking the run line, as you see on your screen right there. Alek Manoah, the ace, is on the hill against Zach Greinke, the veteran. And I like the Blue Jays to start flexing their muscles and maybe ignite their offense a tad. The offense has been held in check the first 5 or 6 games of the season. I'm predicting the Jays find it here against Zach Greinke and the Kansas City Royals. So give me the run line, in that game. The Blue Jays, the Kansas City Royals, and again, Alek Manoah on the hill. A rough outing first time around, so I really think he finds his game. And I would take the over in Alek Manoah's strikeouts as well. So I like the Blue Jays tonight, and many thanks to Betano, our new sponsors here on the program. As we get to the chat, a lot of conversation about Dave Jackson. Hope all of you out there appreciated that conversation and that interview. I've been trying to track him down for a couple weeks to get his perspective. Again, it's just a really, really difficult job to do. Like Total Gamer 1 writes in, why does Wes McCauley always call the Leafs game bias? Gary writes in, wondering what Dave thinks on what lettered players talking to the refs have on the refs' calls. Total Gamer is not a big Wes McCauley guy, as he's proven to say in this chat. Corey Parrish, this is exactly what the Leafs needed for years, was a bottom 6 that could contribute, and that's why this team is deeper and more capable of beating Tampa. I could not agree more. Love what Zach Aston-Reese has brought to the table. And don't forget, I believe Matthew Nyes has another game coming up tomorrow. So Nyes watch on again. And by the end of this weekend, we'll know one way or another, likely coming up on Monday, if Matthew Nyes will sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs and play the last couple of games of the season, and then maybe hopefully give them a very difficult decision in time for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs against Tampa Bay Lightning. Just reading on the chat as well, Super Strict 9, our good buddy, not all calls are judgment calls, in my opinion. Some penalties are blatantly obvious. Jamie wanted me to ask about the hold on Nylander when he stepped on that stick. My apologies, I didn't get to that conversation. PS17, Bunting has a reputation of embellishing. He's paying the price for such. And PS17, that's why I asked that question. What triggers officials? Because at the end of the day, these guys are humans and we have memories. I don't care if you say you don't have a long memory. We have memories. Bunting's dove before. What player in this league, quite frankly, hasn't dove? And I wonder what irks officials. Is it the embellishment? Is it the fact that he's constantly bitching, bickering? You see him on the bench, he's chirping. I want to know the number one thing that triggers the officials, and the answer was all of the above. So very, very curious to see what transpires the next couple of weeks. I thought Michael Bunting, good showing of himself against Columbus. It's one game, but when the lights go on for Game 1 against in the Stanley Cup playoffs, the officiating always seems to be a tad different. So we'll see what happens against Tampa. But I, for one, do not want Michael Bunting to change the style or the way he plays the game. I'm super happy with the way he plays the game, quite frankly. So we'll leave it at that. Many thanks to Jay Rosehill for dropping by the show. 3 Hits with Rosie, another success. Jay's going to be back in the mix tomorrow. And we're going to have his former teammate, Tim Stapleton, on the show. I don't know if you guys caught this. He was on Spit and Chicklets a while back, and he was tremendous. So We're going to get Tim on the show yesterday. We're going to get a breakdown of the Maple Leafs, his perspective, what it was like to be a Toronto Maple Leaf as well. He's an absolute beauty. So Tim Stapleton's coming by. Many thanks to everybody in the chat. I wanted to give you a bit of a different perspective on the show today, an officiating standpoint. We often don't really talk about that. I know Rosie, being a former tough guy, will give hints and bits and pieces as to conversations he's had with officials in the past, but I thought it brought it into light, and it's a perfect time to do so. Again, let's be honest. Love the game against Columbus, but it's a meaningless game in April, so I'm not going to spend 20 minutes breaking it down. It's just a waste of my time, quite frankly. Many thanks to producer Alex as well, and to our feature presentation. Again, Dave Jackson, former NHL ref, current rules analyst with ESPN. Again, if you're not subscribed at the Leafs Nation 401, you can subscribe right now. Help us out. Thank you so much, and we'll talk tomorrow. Take care.